Such a glorious hymn. The words of some of these old hymns are amazing, aren't they? Come thou fount of every blessing, but this last one especially, God himself has set me free. You have cleansed and sanctified me. So you alone shall be my glory, nothing in the world I see. We're going to look at the episode of someone who was set free this morning. Of late, I've been looking at the various signs, what they're called miraculous signs in John's Gospel. The Gospel writers told many miracles of Jesus, but John, in his perhaps deeper, profound thinking, chose 7, really. Most scholars think there's about 7, although I think there's a few more just thrown in because you can't keep God in a box. But anyway, 7 essential miraculous signs. So just definitely more than a party trick, more than meeting mankind at the point of need. But John spoke about these 7 miraculous signs because they are indeed signs to something deeper. Look deeper, folks. Look deeper. There is life. And he says, I wrote this gospel so that you might believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and believing in him, you might have life. You might have life. So it's not just God meeting mankind at a point of need, which it is amazing in itself, but if we reflect deeper, there is life in this. There is life, and John is continually mentioning life. What is life? Life is things that kind of make us flourish and thrive. And the opposite of life is death, that kind of stifles us. That's the point. That's why Jesus came. Even at the beginning of John's Gospel, talks about Jesus. He breathed life in the beginning, actually. At the very beginning, it was his breath, it was God's breath, and Jesus, as the second part of that Trinity, breathed life into us. We have life because God breathes life into us. And then John chapter 3, then there's possibility of new life. Remember Nicodemus? He met Jesus. Unless you're born again, can't see the kingdom of God, but receive my love, my grace, and new possibility of new life. And then a chapter or 2 before, John chapter 7, Jesus stands up and says, you who believe in me, from within will flow rivers of living water gushing out. Come in, you're very welcome. Good to see you, David. Good morning. Yeah, good morning, David. So he wrote this gospel that we might believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that we might have life. And he does that, as I said, with bringing to our attention 7 signs. He starts with the wedding of Canaan, from place of possible shame and regret, not enough wine for a great feast. He turns the water into this glorious wine to show the generosity. Look deeper, folks. There is life. God is generous. He takes away our guilt, our shame, and he ministers something from himself, life itself. Other examples of his miraculous signs. He turned a few loaves of bread and a few fish he multiplied them and Jesus proclaimed, I am the bread of life. In our inadequacy often, he multiplies what we have. He comes towards us in our often inadequacy. And then he stilled a storm, didn't he? The storms of life. He didn't just still a storm to save his disciples. He spoke, he said the words, do not be afraid, it is I. Literally, I am no fear. I am no fear. He is the Lord himself. So if we look at these signs, these miraculous signs, we can see the life that there is in Jesus and receive it. So I'm going to read John chapter 9, which speaks of a miraculous sign, and I believe there's so much life in it that we can also receive. So it's going to be on the screen. Thank you, Esther. And so it says this, as he went along, so on a journey. So this is a journey going on. He saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? I mean, poor lad, not even born. Maybe he sinned. And his parents, just this kind of weight of judgment and stigma over him. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. But while I am in the world, one of his 7 I am statements, I am the light of the world. He's going to open eyes, and not just physical ones too. Having said this, he spat on the ground. That's what my doctor did to me yesterday. No, he didn't. Having said this, he spat on the ground, made some mud with saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, and wash in the pool of Siloam. And this word means sent. And so the man went, lots of kind of going, and washed, and came home rejoicing. So that's the miracle. Very succinct. But a few things happen after that, which I find is so illuminating. And this passage, I'm going to read slightly longer words from the Bible than we normally do. I'm actually going to read the whole chapter, so please don't tell Steve, otherwise I'll be out on the streets. But it makes sense of the context and what God actually did in this man's life. And so there's kind of 5 encounters that happen after this. And first of all, it's the neighbors. You know, here's this miracle, and then it's the neighbors. And so their reaction. That's what it's all about, reaction. You know, are we going to look a bit deeper than this? Are we going to see Jesus as the Son of God, and believing in him we might have life? Well, this is the neighbors, his neighbors, those who had formerly seen him begging, asked, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? And some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. It's almost kind of comic, isn't it, the way it happens? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. I am the man. And now, how then were your eyes opened, they demanded. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is that man, they asked him. I don't know. So this man's, just in a bit lost. What happened? He's just in this whirlwind of a miracle, yes, but who is it? What is it? Where is he? Who is he? And then, so that's meeting number 1. Secondly, Pharisees grab him. Well, actually, the neighbors bring him to the Pharisees, the man who had been blind. Now, so this is the meeting with the Pharisees. Now, the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. And making mud is to do with making bricks, and therefore working on the Sabbath, and so a bit of a religious tangle. You know, what can you do on the Sabbath or not? Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud in my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, well, this man is not from God. God is not keeping the Sabbath. He's working. But others asked, well, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. And finally, they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes that were opened. And the man replied, he's a prophet. It's a little bit of a change there. A prophet, okay. And the Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they sent for now his parents. So now it's third scene, parents and Pharisees and the man. Is this your son? They asked him. Is this your son? Yeah. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? We know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind, but how he can see now and who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He'll speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. When it says the Jews, it just means religious leaders, not the whole nation. For already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why the parents said, he is of age. Ask him. So they were afraid. And so a second time, third scene, back with the religious leaders. A second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God. In other words, tell the truth. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, just judgment all round, isn't it? Judgment of the man, judgment of Jesus now. He replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind, but now I can see. That's a glorious thing, isn't it? We can say that, can't we? I was blind, but now I can see. And they asked him, well, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? They'd already asked this question. So he answered, I've told you already, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples? Can you imagine that one? 2, then of course, they stirred up a hornet's nest. They hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. And the man answered, you can see a change, can't you? That's the point of it. It's a change. Now, that is remarkable. You can see him stroking his beard there. You are this fellow's disciple. Now, that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And so they were furious. To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. Last scene number 5. You've been very patient. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked, tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Imagine that, Jesus in front of him, other eyes being opened now. Then the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. So that's quite a journey. I've read about 40 verses, perhaps happened in the course of a day or a couple of days. That is quite a journey. The motif behind all this is a journey. Remember the very first verse I read? As Jesus went along, he was on a journey. And then when Jesus met the man and he said to him, go to the pool of Siloam, which means sent. He went, he washed, he saw. And he repeats that. He told me to go, so I went and I saw and I washed and I went home rejoicing. It's all verbs of going. On this journey of difficulty and life, there are moments when we can meet the Lord Jesus. And John, another one of his wonderful things, he doesn't just talk about the numbers 7 signs, 7 I am. He presents many of these episodes with the background of one of the Jewish feasts. And if you look at a chapter or 2 earlier, it's the Feast of Tabernacles in this case, when they were wandering in the desert and when the Lord provided for them manna and he provided for them water out of the rock, and he went before them in the pillar of fire so they could see. It's all about the journey. It's all about going with Jesus and following him. But on this journey, basically 2 things happened. This was a journey to faith, wasn't it? He starts with the man they call Jesus. His eyes are open, the man they call Jesus. And he says he doesn't know where he is. And a bit later, you put mud on my eyes and wash, and now I can see. Who is he then? Who do you say he is? The prophet. So he's from just this man they call Jesus, now the prophet. And then when he meets Jesus himself, what does he say? Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? Tell me who he is that I may believe. It's kind of, tell me, sir, who is this Son of Man? And then he says, now you have seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. And so from that, he sees that he is the Son of Man. His reaction, instead of, he was just a man called Jesus, not just a prophet, not just sir, it's now, the last verse we read, Lord, Lord, I believe. Now it's just something that happened to him, miraculous though that was. And what does he do? He worships him. And that's a word in Greek, proskuneo, which means come towards to kiss. That's quite a journey, really, isn't it? From this man who's just by the side of the road in a day or so, maybe a day, he came on this journey of faith. From just a man, just a prophet, to Lord, I believe. And as John said, He wrote this so that we might believe and have life. And he moved towards him to worship him. That's a journey of faith, isn't it? And the Lord invites us to go on this journey of faith, that our eyes might be open, that we might worship him. Brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant. Amazing episode. But it's also a journey, not just from unbelief, let's say, to faith, but a journey into freedom. Can you see a growing freedom in this man as we read these words together? At the very beginning, it says the accusation was he's blind, so something must have happened. He must have sinned, or his parents. It was this kind of judgment, this kind of prejudice, this kind of dampening of life. Can you imagine living through life? Or maybe I'm a sinner. I don't even know what I've done. You know, here I am, like in this condition. Must have done something wrong. And this kind of exclusion in life. And not only just did he have this physical blindness, but there must be something, this kind of stigma, there must be something wrong with him, something wrong with his family. So he's grown up, birth, adolescence, childhood, adulthood. What a journey of just this weight of him from childhood, not even knowing what he's done, but the sense of being something's wrong somewhere. People don't like me, people reject me. But when Jesus comes, he didn't only open his physical eyes, there was a light. I am the light of the world. And he showed him, and Jesus said it wasn't that this man's sin was the cause of what happened. Jesus showed that this man was precious and valued, and he wanted him, and glorious things could happen in his life, and he could bring glory to God. Now that's a journey of freedom, isn't it? Because I don't know about you. Maybe you have grown up in maybe a stream of untruths that are just kind of filtered away from childhood. Maybe it's not just a stream. Maybe it's a river of untruths. You're too this. Have you heard? You're too fat. You're too thin. You're too tall. You're too small. You're stupid. And maybe you're not ... enough. Have you had that? Just kind of spoken over you. You're not pretty enough. You're not intelligent enough. Your words aren't important. You need to just be quiet, be silent. Through no fault of your own, a stigma from others. And maybe those voices kind of just repeat in our own heads, and we sort of beat ourselves up. I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. And people won't accept me, or people don't like me, or people will reject me. All these kind of things. I was talking to a lovely person a while back, and in their 70s, they'd realized, I find it so hard in social interaction because I just feel people won't accept me, they'll just reject me. And I couldn't believe it, because this person, you've got such a beautiful voice and a beautiful personality. How can you feel that, really? But the Lord was doing a new work in his life, this person's life. And he sensed he was coming into a new freedom, letting all those kind of voices of childhood and adolescence just wash away. And the Lord was bringing this person into a new freedom. Isn't that wonderful? We need light to see not only who Jesus is, the Son of God, but he wants to set us free. Because where do all these kind of negative things come from? Jesus, in the chapter before, he says the devil is the father of lies. Lies get spoken over us. Lies get spoken into us. And we tend to believe them, unfortunately. And the Lord wants to open our eyes to set us free. Revelation 12 says the enemy, the devil, is the accuser of their brethren. He accuses us day and night. Zechariah chapter 3 talks about a high priest, Joshua, and the vision of that chapter was a man, but with mud bespattered robes, and it spoke of all the lies that had been slung at him, metaphorically speaking. And the Lord said, take off those muddy robes and put on a white robe and linen on his head to show that those are lies, and I want him to be free to serve me. That's what the Lord does. He brings us to the light to set us free. And this man was being set free, wasn't he? He said, I've told you who he is to the Pharisees, and you didn't listen. Do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become disciples too? That's a growing, you can imagine him to begin with, under the weight of it. Now it is. Do you want to become disciples too? There's a growing boldness in him, isn't there? Assuredness, looking in the eye of his detractors, a certain cheekiness. And these leaders, they insult him. You're his disciple, he says. And then he goes on to say, now that's that lovely verse. Now that's remarkable. Don't you know where he comes from? Yet he opened my eyes. He must be from God. It was a progressive boldness to stand up. This is the Lord. This is someone. He can't be a sinner. He has set me free. He has opened my eyes. And then they hurl insults at him, and then they throw him out, it says. Throw him out is not just out of the temple or the synagogue. This is out of the Jewish way of life. In other words, he wouldn't have been able to buy bread from loyal fellow Jews, and his parents wouldn't have been able to have him, very easily at home. A more instigation. They threw him out. They reject him. But he comes to the point of freedom. He meets Jesus, and he says, Lord, I believe. And whatever people do to him, whatever people say, you just get that sense, I am free. When the Son sets me free, I am free indeed. That's what the Lord does. He opens our eyes spiritually. He opens our eyes to all the lies that have been hurled at us, because he wants us to have life and to thrive. It just reminds me of this picture. Can you just put it up, Esther, just a moment? Of kintsugi, this Japanese art of broken pieces put together with this art of lacquer and gold, and made so beautiful. Those kind of cracks. Kintsugi means golden repair. That's what God does in our lives, isn't it? It's a golden repair job. He puts those cracks, those scars, and he makes them beautiful as he redeems them. You are not rejected. I love you. I welcome you. That is the Lord, isn't he? That's what he does. It's kintsugi in a very deep way. And a guest very recently had this testimony, and they've given permission to share it. And as they left this place not so long ago, they said, "Thank you for a place soaked in the presence of the Lord and washed in prayer." There's a verse in John 10 which says, "The watchman opens the door for him." So in the safety of this place, and in that facilitating opening of a place long shut off in my heart of great pain and devastation, the Lord did and is doing a work of kintsugi. In a heart of great pain and devastation, the Lord does a great work of kintsugi. It's what happened in this man's life. It's what he wants to do in our lives. So just an amazing poem that encapsulates this, and maybe it's a prayer by Jan Richardson, which is entitled "Where the Light Begins." Thank you. So it says this: perhaps it does not just begin, perhaps it is always. Perhaps it takes a lifetime to open our eyes, to learn to see what has forever shimmered in front of us. The luminous line of the map in the dark, the vigil flame in the house of the heart. The love so searing we cannot keep from singing, from crying out in testimony and in praise. Just take a moment to let that sink in. This is the Lord standing before you with love so searing we cannot keep from singing, from crying out in testimony and praise. Perhaps this day will be the mountain over which the dawn breaks. Perhaps we will turn our face toward it toward what has always been. Perhaps our eyes will finally open in ancient recognition, willingly dazzled, illuminated at last. Perhaps this day the light begins in us. So simply, Lord, would you come amongst your people? Would you set us free with your light? Would you dispel untruths over our lives that have been said to us, that we've said to ourselves? Would you bring us into the freedom, the dazzling freedom of your searing love? Just take a moment. What's the Lord saying to you this morning?